A state is not a state if it is not recognized by other states. So, why is Palestine not recognized as a state? Let's get started in uncovering why Palestine is not recognized as a state. Hi, I'm Hugo, and I love researching into extraordinary topics. Before we begin, I'd like to note that this video will go over the details of the dispute and will not be taking any side on this issue. So first, I am going to be giving a brief background of the topic. I attempted to write the history of this dispute, but failed many times because the history is incredibly complex due to many things, including wars and UN Security Council resolutions, that it requires its own video. So instead, I'm going to be giving a brief background into the topic. According to a Brookings Institute op-ed titled, "Why Palestinian Statehood is a Question for the UN," Israelis and Palestinians have been fighting each other for decades, where Israel has controlled the West Bank and Gaza for 44 years, where the overwhelming majority of Palestinians in these territories were born under occupation. Furthermore, it is important to note that Israeli settlers in occupied territories vote in Israeli elections, while Palestinians can't vote, where, short of a strong international position, every Israeli government will hear the settlers' voices before hearing the Palestinians. Occupation is thus prolonged and Palestinian statehood becomes less viable. In this, even the argument of Israelis seeking compromise has been distracting, resting on the fear that without a Palestinian state, Arabs would undermine Israel's Jewish majority or its democracy. That may be true, but Israel's principal occupation to withdraw from the occupied territories is the same as the Arabs' obligation to accept Israel UN resolution. Thus, Israel-Palestinian tensions and conflicts have led to inequalities and anxieties through actions such as Israelis not giving Palestinians a voice in Israeli elections, and fear of Arabs undermining Israel's Jewish majority or Israeli democracy. There are some who want Palestine to be recognized as a state. For instance, the European Council on Foreign Relations argued in their article, 5 Reasons to Recognize a Palestinian State, that recognizing a Palestinian state based on the 1967 borders reaffirms the EU's support for the two-state solution and the legitimacy of Israel, where recognizing Palestine also reaffirms the EU's long-standing position on the illegality of Israel's occupation, which views Israel's settlement enterprise as detrimental to peace and security. Likewise, an article by International Relations, the world's leading international relations website for academics, students, and anyone interested in international relations, said Palestine needs to be recognized and admitted into the United Nations if the international community wishes to hold Palestine accountable for violations of international law and to safeguard its rights to question the violation of international law by other states, where non-recognition of Palestine as a state and as a member of the United Nations also precludes it from approaching the International Court of Justice to arbitrate the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Because of this, some believe recognizing Palestine as a state would hold Palestine accountable for its actions, support the two-state solution within the region, and address Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. However, some don't want Palestine to be recognized. For example, an opinion article from the New York Times argued that Palestine shouldn't be recognized as a state because of many things, such as that Palestinians apparently refuse to recognize or peacefully coexist with the State of Israel, and that recognizing Palestine would be advancing Israel's ruin, where, quote, with strategic blindness and moral depravity now serving the twin guideposts for European policy towards Israel, Israel and its supporters must tell the truth about the push to recognize Palestine. It isn't about peace or justice. It's about hating Israel and assisting those who most actively seek its obliteration. Therefore, some don't want Palestine to be recognized, as Palestinians apparently refuse to recognize or peacefully coexist with Israel, and that recognizing Palestine would be a threat to Israel. So, to recap, Israeli and Palestinian conflicts and tensions have led to anxieties and inequalities through actions like Israelis not giving Palestinians a voice in Israeli elections, and the fear of Arabs undermining Israeli democracy and Israel's Jewish majority, that some want Palestine to be recognized, as it would bring accountability to Palestine for its actions, would support the two-state solution in the region, and address Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories, and that others don't want Palestine to be recognized, as Palestinians apparently refuse to recognize or peacefully coexist with Israel, and that recognizing Palestine would be a threat to Israel. Thank you for watching my video, and merci et à bientôt.